From time to time, I like to take a step back and look at the grand arc of the Torah and think about how do the stories and the parshiyyot tie together to create a whole fabric that we are learning from. In this week's Torah portion, Mishpatim presents us with an interesting puzzle in that regard. When we think about the arc of the Exodus story, we move from slavery in Egypt to God's liberation, to the covenant at Mount Sinai, and then into the building of the Mishkan, the sanctuary in which God dwells in the wilderness. And that arc makes sense. God takes us out of Egypt, we enter into covenant with God, and then we build this structure that shows our honor for God and our desire to have God in our midst. And yet in the midst of all of this, we get Parshat Mishpatim, 53 laws about theft and about slaves and financial matters and personal injury and rental property and all kinds of things that seem actually rather mundane. And so it begs the question, why do we have these here, interrupting this flow from covenant to the creation of a sanctuary, as opposed to having these mitzvot later in the Torah, where we have also other mitzvot of the same style? Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, a great 19th century rabbi in Russia and the great-grandfather of the famous Joseph Soloveitchik of Yeshiva University, offers an interesting perspective in this regard. Because he says that we have this parsha, Mishpatim, before we have the giving to the Mishkan, to teach us that before we make a donation, we first need to pay attention to social justice. We need to think about not only what's the money that we're giving, but where did that money come from? And did we get that money in a way that really lives up to the values of justice and fairness that the Torah expects of us? Put differently, the ends don't justify the means. And we need to be sure not only that we are giving the right amounts in the right places, but also that we are coming by our donations in a way that truly realizes the values of the Torah. And that before we can build a Mishkan, before we can create a beautiful physical structure, whether that's a Mishkan in the wilderness or the temple in Jerusalem or a synagogue wherever we dwell, before we create these physical structures to remind us of God's glory, we first need to be living our lives in ways that bring glory to God. And by placing these mitzvot of social justice between the covenant and the building of the Mishkan, the Torah reminds us that it is these values that are of paramount importance in a Jewish life. Shabbat Shalom.
צור מי שלא אכלנו, צור מי שלא אכלנו, צור מי שלא